I was born in Ukraine and came to the United States of America in 1996, and went to school here in the United States of America, served in the U.S. Army, and then was elected as a bishop of the church back in 2007. Well, the Ukrainian community in general, and especially the Ukrainian American community, is extremely concerned over the last events in Ukraine. Obviously, the events of the last month, the month of February, when the previous government of Ukraine resigned and fled Ukraine. The new provisional government was appointed by the equivalent of our Senate or the Congress, Verkhovna Rada as they call them, and they began to initiate certain steps in order to preserve the integrity of the Ukrainian state as a nation, as a country. Unfortunately, there are some forces in Ukraine that desire the return to the old borders of Soviet Union, recreation of the Union. And that's especially, we're talking about the eastern part of Ukraine and also the Crimean Peninsula. And that's what's the world's attention right now as of today. There is a vote, historic vote, that was orchestrated by Russian Federation that takes place in order to separate the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine. And obviously the nation is concerned. The integrity, geopolitical strategy of the entire region is at stake at this point. The government of the United States of America is involved, and the European Union as well. So that's where we are at this point. It was an unbelievable experience. My parents are from Ukraine, obviously. I was born there. And when we saw the events of February 20th in Kiev, when first 100 young students lost their lives trying to stand up for the freedom, waving Ukrainian flags. And it's interesting that you asked me about being from Ukraine, because recently I gave an interview to one of the newspapers in New Jersey, New York area, and they asked me a question about ultra-nationalists that are on the streets of Kiev waving flags and screaming for the independence of Ukraine. And I was concerned about that question because in the United States of America, when we see somebody who's patriotic, waving US flag, we call it patriotism. That's standing up for what is right. Well, the same is happening in Ukraine, and I was extremely proud of the young people who sacrificed their lives defending the independence of that nation. So being in Ukraine recently, I was empowered by the church to deliver the first financial assistance, humanitarian aid to those that lost their lives and those that were wounded. I went to the main street, Maidan or Khreshchatyk, the main street of Kyiv, and paid respects to the places where those young people lost their lives. Mountains of flowers, thousands upon thousands of people coming on a daily basis to prayerfully venerate the presence of clergy, Ukrainian Orthodox and Ukrainian Catholic clergy on the streets of Kyiv, trying to comfort people, prayer services. It just moves you. It moves you to the point that you stand and you're humbled by the ability of humanity to produce, to sacrifice, to stand up for what is right. I was honored and blessed also on behalf of the church to visit the portable hospitals in some of the churches in Kyiv, in Ukraine, where the first wounded were treated by the volunteer doctors and nurses. One of those hospitals in the monastery, Ukrainian Orthodox monastery, right up the hill from the street. I met some of the priests and seminarians and people that were carrying the wounded and the dead. One priest, in fact, mentioned to me, his name is Bohdan, Father Bohdan, and he said, "Bishop, I go to bed and that's all I remember, the legs of people I was carrying, because we had nothing to carry them on. We just picked them by their arms and by their legs and tried to save them." The church provided financial assistance, obviously. I was able to buy medical equipment for those that were in need. But in addition to that, my parents, and I'm from Western Ukraine, there were 3 people from my immediate home area where I was born that 2 of them were killed and the other one is wounded, is still in the hospital. So what we did is I had the chance to visit with the families of the deceased young men, met with their parents, and it's interesting that the mother and the father, the parents of Ihor Kostenko, his first and last name, they were working in St. Petersburg, Russia, trying to find better life for their kids in order to earn more money and so they can pay for the education, taking into consideration the economic state of the region. And they were notified in Russia that their son was killed, being patriot of Ukraine, being the hero of Ukraine. So they took the first train to Kiev, came to Kiev, and from there they went to the small town of Buchach, western Ukraine. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, about 5,000 people came to the streets to welcome his physical remains. So they told me the story, and I met with them and with the grandparents, obviously. We went to the gravesite. We had a memorial service with the mayor of the local village and the representatives of the local community. And then the hospital, you have a 22-year-old man laying in bed with his legs destroyed. And I'm asking about his experiences, about his life, and he tells me, I am not the hero. The heroes are those that lost their lives. I'm alive, and as soon as I get better, I intend to go back and to stand up for what is right for my homeland. So, as you can tell, amazing experiences. It's very difficult to comprehend unless you experience that feeling of patriotism. I saw something similar when I was a chaplain in the U.S. Army years ago when we were involved in a conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I was stationed at that point at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And to see the youth here in the United States of America believing in what is right for our nation and willing to sacrifice their lives for the freedoms, not only of the United States of America, but also for the world, for that matter, it was uplifting. And it's almost the same feeling, it's almost the same experience that you see. The only difference is I was right there when the loss of human life took place at this particular moment in history. I want peace. I want stability for that nation, for my ancestral homeland. I want everything that we enjoy here in the United States of America or in the Western world for my parents, for my brothers and sisters, meaning in general terms, so that people can enjoy the freedoms, the God-given freedoms. People can enjoy the dignity of human life. People can come to the streets waving their flags and proclaiming their loyalty to their nation, that the borders of Ukraine will be preserved, that no neighboring state can make a decision at any given moment, say, we decided to take over this or that particular region. Peace, that's what we pray for. Every single church, we pray for the peace in the world. If only we would start acting in terms of what we pray for. The interim president of Ukraine, he's the Speaker of the House who was appointed by the Verkhovna Rada to act as president at this point. Obviously, he's reaching out to the world community, basically asking the world community to preserve the integrity of Ukrainian state, to help Ukraine. Ukrainian military is not as sophisticated, as developed. After all, back at the collapse of Soviet Union, Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal, signing an agreement with the United States of America and Russia that Ukrainian borders will be preserved, and Russia and United States of America will guarantee that, God forbid, somebody will try to interfere, they will be the ones to protect. Well, now one of those co-signers, Russian Federation, is violating its own agreement that it struck. So obviously the government of Ukraine is concerned. The Prime Minister of Ukraine was just in Washington, D.C., met with President Obama and the Vice President, and also was at the United Nations at the Security Council for the Security Council meeting, and expressing their concern and hoping for the peaceful resolution of the conflict. But in the reports that I've read this morning already, people are not, those that are not showing up to the voting places booth, the so-called authorities are taking police escort and going to the homes of people and telling them, you must vote. They're stopping people in the streets and telling them to vote. So obviously, there are all kinds of provocations, and the rules and the regulations of any referendum, civilized referendum, are not being followed in that particular region, which makes it invalid. And the United Nations, European Union, and United States government already spoken and stated that we will not recognize that referendum. Because there are a number of historical factors that should be considered when we're talking about the history of Ukraine. Throughout the existence of Ukrainian state, there were all kinds of external powers that tried to separate the nation. And during the Soviet times, obviously, the eastern part was controlled with a tighter grip than Western Ukraine. And people were relocated following the Ukrainian artificially created famine in 1930s. And so there are closer connections with the Russian Federation in that region. But we're talking about a new generation that was raised in independent Ukraine now. The younger generation, they speak Ukrainian. Even if they speak two languages, Ukrainian and Russian, they'd rather see Ukrainian flag flying over their heads, and they're home. And nobody can take the feeling of being at home away from you. And that's what we're really dealing with right now. Today, on the streets of Kharkiv, eastern Ukraine, Donetsk, eastern Ukraine, Dnipropetrovsk, Luhansk, eastern Ukraine, those are the major cities. Major demonstrations taking place. On one hand, you have people that are demanding unification with Russia, but the greater demonstrations are of the ones that are standing up for the sovereign integrity of the Ukrainian state. I was appointed as a bishop of the Western Eparchy for the church, and this happens to be part of my eparchial boundaries. And Makiz Rocks is a very dear parish. It's in a beautiful location. I've learned so much yesterday as I spent a little bit more time about Pittsburgh area. But we're in the Lenten season. Obviously, it's a second week of Lent. It's my pastoral visit to the parish to reflect upon the Lenten journey, but at the same time to unite with the parish family for the cause of Ukrainian integrity as well. I'm leaving on the 31st of March, obviously, but if people would like to make a donation, I would like to encourage the Pittsburgh community, if anybody can afford to make any donation to help the nation of Ukraine, please go to the church's website, www.uocofusa.org, and you will see a Ukrainian flag, blue and yellow, and says "Help Ukraine." And all donations are tax deductible, obviously, and we would be grateful for any possible assistance the community can make.